Eliminate taxes on tips for service and hospitality workers.
And all of a sudden, she's making a speech and there will be no tax on tips. I said that months ago. And by the way, they had just the opposite. You know, they had not only tax on tips, but they hired 88,000 IRS agents, and many of them were assigned to go get waitresses and caddies and all of this on tips.
And that was former President Trump speaking to Elon Musk last night on X, slamming Vice President Kamala Harris for copying his no tax on tips plan. The White House now claims that President Biden supports this idea. Watch.
So why then have the president and vice president not talked about this over the past 3.5 years?
The president supports eliminating taxes on tips for service and hospitality workers. And at the same time, what this president and this vice president has been able to do is help raising minimum wage. This is part of the vice president's policy. This is something that we want to see happen.
Just last month, the Biden-Harris administration was actively telling people how to pay their taxes on all of their tips, releasing this IRS guidance that includes a, quote, interactive tax assistant, which checks to see if people's tips are taxable. Joining me now is Texas Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne, who recently hosted a massive jobs fair in Arlington, which featured 500 business and more than 30,000 job seekers. Congresswoman, thanks very much for joining us. Before we get to your jobs fair, what do you make of this fight over tax on tips? I remember when the Inflation Reduction Act was just passing, there was, what, $80 billion in there to go to the IRS so that the IRS could hire all these agents to, in fact, find all the tips that were not being taxed. So they're doing a total 180 here.
The IRS, the Biden-Harris IRS actually came out and publicly stated that those agents would be used. Some of those agents would be used to focus on making sure that people were paying taxes on their tips. And now they're doing a complete 180. But look, I mean, they have been dragging around a corpse for the last 3 years. So the base is now excited because Kamala is in, and they've got somebody who they can follow and who's actually, out and about. She still hasn't done an interview with the media, with the press, but let's put that aside. The fact is that they have an arsonist policies. She was the head arsonist. She was the deciding vote in the dishonest Inflation Reduction Act, which led to some of the highest inflation that we've ever seen. Working families are now having to pay on average $11,000 more per year just to get the same basics. She was at the head of that, and now they're trying to completely flip it. This is not her first day, right? She keeps saying what she's going to do on her first day. She's over 1,000 days into her job. When are you going to start actually worrying about the American taxpayer? Don't tell us what you're going to do. Do it now.
Well, that's not the only flip. I mean, she's flip-flopping all over the place. She's certainly doing a flip-flop on the border as well while she was rallying in Arizona. Harris called for, quote, strong border security. But while campaigning for president back in October of 2019, she vowed to close immigration detention centers on day one of her presidency. Meanwhile, a California border sheriff says that he was shown in one of Kamala Harris's campaign ads that highlighted the need for border security without his permission. The sheriff says that he does not support Harris for president, and he's accusing the campaign of including misleading information in the ad, telling Fox News Digital, quote, the truth is Harris never cared about the cartels and did nothing to stop people from illegally crossing the border. Immigration and Customs and Enforcement made 50 criminal arrests across the country in just one day last month. Officials arrested 3 men from Honduras and Texas, 2 of them previously convicted of sex crimes on children. The third had been convicted of murder. Congresswoman, I mean, look, do you think she's just sort of speaking to the crowds of where she is? She was in Arizona. She's talking about the border in Arizona. Or do you think she's actually gotten religion on the border? She was supposed to be the border czar under Biden, and she didn't even go to the border. They kept saying the border was secure when it wasn't. We all know that. We've all been to the border. You have, I have, and many others.
60 days into the Biden-Harris administration, Biden basically placed her in charge of protecting our borders and to prevent a number of people coming through. 3.5 years later, we've seen nearly 15 million people come through under their policies. She has completely ignored that responsibility. She went down to El Paso and saw a sanitized version of that city, did not bother going down to the border, has not bothered working with our Customs and Border Patrol folks. If she was concerned at all, she knows the policies that worked. They were already on the table when they came into office. They worked under President Trump. We had some of the lowest rates ever of people illegally crossing into our country. But instead of following those policies, keeping those policies, they took them away. And now what you're seeing with Waltz is they're doubling down. I mean, they are both incentivizing. She's talked about how she wants to get rid of private health care, and she wants to give taxpayer-funded health care to all illegal immigrants coming in. They want to open the borders. They're fine with that. They have handed over control of our border to Mexican cartels, drug and sex traffickers. This is what they're doing under there. And we have no reason to believe that she's changed her mind, except that the polls show that they're losing on that issue. And so she's simply changing for political expediency.
I know, but I wonder why. I mean, why would anyone who is the steward of our great nation, our great country, allow an open border where you've got all these illegals coming in and we don't even know half of their intentions? I mean, the GOP House Freedom Caucus is now demanding that the next government funding bill include the SAVE Act. Okay? The Senate won't even bring it to the floor for a debate. It prevents non-citizens from voting in federal elections, as you know. The Harris campaign requiring all people to present an ID to attend her rally in Arizona over the weekend. So you need ID to go see Harris speak, despite the fact that Harris previously called Republican voter ID laws racist. And in 2021, she claimed that people in rural states can't prove their identity because they don't have access to copy machines. Watch this.
Is agreeing to voter ID one of those compromises that you'd support?
I don't think that we should underestimate what that could mean. Because in some people's mind, that means, well, you're going to have to Xerox or photocopy your ID to send it in to prove you are who you are. Well, there are a whole lot of people, especially people who live in rural communities, who don't, there's no Kinko's, there's no Office Max near them.
I mean, I can't even believe she got away with that answer, Congresswoman. She actually got away with that answer, saying that you don't need a voter ID because you might have not access to a Kinko's.
Now, you need to actually get out to the rural folks and find out how they feel about it, because they'll tell you they're offended by that statement. Well, I mean, look, you have an ability to be able to vote. All we were asking in the SAVE Act is that if you are illegally here, you don't. But why? You ask the question, why do they want people who are here illegally? They're counting them in the census to make up for people who have left. You know, they voted with their feet and left places like California and New York. They're trying to repopulate those areas to make sure that they can continue to keep those congressional districts. Yvette Clarke out of New York, you know, the Democrat representative has already said that. This is their own statements. They're giving them away. It's terrible.
We got to jump, but real quick on your jobs fair, we just got weak numbers and a weak forecast from Home Depot showing a real weakness for the consumer. What did you see in the jobs fair, real quick?
Look, we had almost 25 to 30,000 people who came out, and you're seeing, working families, young families, or who are struggling right now. They were the people that were represented. But the thing that surprised me the most was the number of senior citizens that came. The number of senior citizens that said they had retired, and that they were actually shocked that they're having to now go back into the workforce to make ends meet. So it's not just younger that are being offended by this, but it's also seniors.
You're right. That is troubling, actually. In your golden years, you think you're going to relax and have some time off, and yet you got to get another job because you need the money. Congresswoman, thank you. Congresswoman Van Dyne joining us.
If you enjoy this content, please consider subscribing to my channel to stay up to date with future videos. Thank you for watching.